Hello guys, welcome back to a new video on my channel. It has been so long since I last did a video to do with books and it's long overdue. So today we're talking all things books. I have 5 books that I think that you should read before the end of the year, and then we're also going to go through 5 books that are on my TBR that I want to make sure that I read before the end of the year. So let's just hop right into things. Okay, I've got a stack of books here, of books that I think that you should make sure you read before the end of the year, and I'm going to try to convince you why. Some of these books are books that I've read pretty recently, others are books that I just feel like are so good and are not talked about enough, and so we're going to go through all of these. Let's start with the book that I have on top. So this is Serenade. It is a Balanchine story by Tony Bentley. I don't think I'm ever going to shut up about this book. I absolutely adore this book. I will say I do think that you would probably get more out of this if you are a dancer, a ballerina, you have an interest in dance and the arts. It's definitely more tailored towards you. It basically goes through every single step in the ballet Serenade, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's literally like a 30-minute ballet. You can look it up on YouTube. The music, incredible. It's Tchaikovsky, and the ballet itself is just literally just so gorgeous. So even if you aren't interested in this book, please go watch the ballet on YouTube or something, because it is just magical. Anyway, it goes through all of that, but at the same time kind of going through the life of George Balanchine, who, again, if you are not in the ballet world, he is a very famous choreographer in the US, and he is more or less the person who brought ballet in the form that we know it today to the United States. He started School of American Ballet, New York City Ballet. It all grew from him, and he has a very particular technique that is a little bit different from some other classical styles, and that I actually really love Balanchine technique, so this one really resonated with me. And like I said, it's just gorgeous. It's very intricately written, like in the sense of I think it's beautiful in the writing itself, and I think it's very hard to tell a story about dance in words, but she does it very, very well. So I would highly recommend this one. I feel like if you're going to go see like the Nutcracker or anything like that this Christmas, this gives you a little bit more insight into what the ballet world is really like. The next book that I have here is one that I read actually pretty recently. I actually read this with a book club, which was so much fun. This was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I feel like this has definitely gotten quite a lot of attention on TikTok and social media. It's probably not your first time hearing about this book. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, so I won't say it's my absolute favorite. That being said, I thought that it had some really unique elements to it that I haven't seen in a lot of other books, which is why I think that you should read it before the end of this year. So there's a lot of different point of views in this. The book follows our main character, Tova. She works at an aquarium, and she develops a pretty interesting relationship with the octopus at this aquarium. Now, we actually get a few chapters from the point of view of the octopus. His name is Marcellus, and I just really like the way that she plays around with what the reader does and doesn't know throughout the story. I have a few little qualms with it in that I feel like I like a surprise, and I can't say I was particularly surprised by the end of this book. But that being said, I did enjoy the process of getting there, and I think that she did something very interesting by having the reader sometimes know things that other characters didn't know, and so you're kind of reacting to that in the way that you read, and I thought that that was pretty unique and different to a lot of books that I've read recently. So this is it's wholesome in the end, and I feel like it does go into a lot to do with grief and loneliness, so definitely look up any of those triggers before you go reading this. But I actually really did like it, even though I thought it was a relatively average book. It is a book that I still feel like a lot of people would enjoy. The next book I would recommend is another one that I do think has had quite a lot of hype around it, but for very, very good reasons. So this is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and the main characters in this story are game designers, and it's basically going along and following their story. There's like 3 of them. It talks about love and loss and friendships. The main character has a disability, so it kind of goes into some of that kind of stuff as well, and I just feel like it was just such a good read. Like, it had me so hooked in the sense of, like, it wasn't an adventure story, which I typically like pretty plot-driven books, and I wouldn't necessarily say that this was. Like, it covers so much time throughout this book, and it goes through so many different stages of life that the main characters go through, which again is a little bit different than the books that I typically read, but I thought that it was incredible. I cried, and when a book makes me cry, I know it's a good book, because I typically don't cry in books unless I've really connected to the characters. I wouldn't say that this is only for people who are interested in gaming. Like, that is not really something that's my forte. The plot isn't super heavily focused on that, though there are those elements. So if you do enjoy that kind of thing, you probably would find that part to be pretty interesting. And it's one of those books where I just thought that the writing style was just really, really, really well done, to the point where I just felt like the words just glided through my brain and just penetrated so well. Like, she just was able to describe things in a way that really resonated with me, which I really, really liked. The next book is one that, if you have been sleeping on this book like I was, you need to you need to be reading this before the end of this year. This is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Guys, this book is so good. Like, the type of magic that is in this is just not something I have ever seen in any other type of book. I read a lot of fantasy. I read a lot of romantasy, to be fair. It's not usually just fantasy, but I do read a decent amount of fantasy as well. And this is just so unique in the world building. The plot was really, really good, but I really just feel like the world building is what made me really, really love this book. So, like, a really good, I feel like, fall read. I did read it over the summer, but I feel like it would very much give me like fall vibes if I was to not have read it yet. I'd want to read this in the fall, so I definitely think that you should start this. There is a rebellion aspect to it. Like I said, it is a fantasy, so there is like a very unique magic system in these books. And yeah, there's spies, there's sneaking around, there's danger, there's adventure. There's really everything, and again, it's just like the writing style is so good. It was so entertaining. It was funny. I like books that make me laugh as well as cry. I feel like the mark of a good book is one that can very much do both, and this one definitely did. So, highly recommend that one. And then the last book that I'm going to recommend to you guys that you have to read before the end of this year is First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This was actually a Book of the Month book that I got last year. And when I tell you, I could not put this book down. I was so enamored by it. Like, it just kept me guessing. I had no clue. Like, there are definitely twists and turns that I knew were coming, but it kept me on my toes for sure. This book follows Evie Porter, and basically all that we know about her is that she is given an identity, and then she has to basically integrate herself into the lives of the people that she is around to complete some sort of job or whatever. She doesn't really know the person that she's working for or anything like that, so it is a little bit of a mystery wrapped in a mystery, and yeah, you're just kept guessing from the beginning. There's a lot of things that you just learn as you go, and there's just, I love a good book that just has you trying to figure out what's happening throughout the whole book, and this is definitely that. The book also plays a lot with time, so it kind of goes back and forth, which I also think is pretty interesting. So you're slowly learning about both the past and the present at the same time, and trying to work out who is one step ahead of the other people. So those are the 5 books that I think that you should read before the end of this year. If you do read any of these, and you have to make sure to let me know. Now we're going to go through the 5 books that I want to read before the end of this year. Now we'll see if I actually get through all of these, because some of these have been on my TBR for a minute, but they also all look really good. Let's start with The Seventh Veil of Salome. First of all, the cover of this book is just gorgeous, and I feel like this is enough to make me want to read it. The name of this book also always makes me think of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I feel like, I don't know, anytime that 7 is in the name, I always think of that book. It says, a young woman wins the role of a lifetime in a film about a legendary heroine, but the real drama is behind the scenes in this sumptuous historical epic from the author of Mexican Gothic. That convinces me. I love a good drama in high society. I love something to do with movies, and I love a little historical aspect to it. I feel like this is very much like fall vibes as well on the cover. It's just like, you know, dark, it's kind of mysterious, and it's like, ooh, what's it gonna be? So it takes place in 1950s Hollywood, and yeah, this new girl comes into the picture and everyone's like, who is she? Why did she get the role? So this is pretty high up on the TBR. really, really want to try to read it while it's still fall, like October, November. Next, we have, can you tell I'm like behind on my book of the month reads because The Seventh Veil of Salome, as well as The Favorites, were both book of the month books. And it's actually a subscription I really need to cancel because I keep getting books and I have not been keeping up with reading them. Anyway, this is like a figure skating story, and I feel like that is the perfect book to read in the wintertime, like December. I will be reading this. So the book follows two friends who have a pretty turbulent past and history. They become close and they wind up skating together in the Olympics, but something very drastic happens, and so some time passes and they are now finally revisiting it 10 years after the fact. So I'm very excited to see how this goes. I've heard really good things about it, and again, gorgeous cover, and I love ice skating. I feel like in another life I was a figure skater. Okay, so my next two are low-key cheats. I feel like maybe I shouldn't be calling them like or including them in part of my 5 books I want to read for the rest of the year because I am actively already reading them, but that's okay. The first one is Project Hail Mary. This is by Andy Weir. I mentioned I read Remarkably Bright Creatures with the book club, and now we are moving on to this book. And I'm about, I think I'm like 150 pages in so far, and it's already so intriguing. Picture this, you're a scientist, something in the world has gone terribly wrong, and you have to go up in space to figure out what it is. So you are now alone in space, and you have to basically solve all of humanity's problems. A very small ask, really. Pretty straightforward. I really like the humor in this book so far, and I'm very curious to see what actually winds up happening. It's supposed to be made into a movie next year as well, so I am excited for that. On the cover of this, it literally says, soon to be a major motion picture starring Ryan Gosling, so I am very much picturing Ryan Gosling, aka Ken, in all of the witty little lines that our main character says in this, because he is very witty and very funny, but you know, he's keeping me on my toes as well. Clearly very smart. If you're a nerd like I am and you like physics, you're gonna love this book because he like references a lot of different physics and math things, and not to throw you off if that is not your forte, it's not really something you have to understand to be able to follow the book. You get the picture of just like this guy is a nerd, but I find it very entertaining. Next, I am determined to finish, and actually these are my next 2 books, so these are my last 2 books of my 5 books that I want to read this year, and that is that I want to finish the Crescent City series. I really like this series, like I really enjoyed the first book, but I just find large books like this to be much harder to get through nowadays, that I just have a busy life. Anyway, so I'm currently this far into House of Sky and Breath, and then I also want to read House of Flame and Shadow. I have read like all of the other Sarah J. Maas books, so I feel like I should finish out the collection. I've also heard that before we get the next ACOTAR book, that you need to have read these to be able to understand what's going on. So I'm like, okay, I'm committing. These are like top of my list of getting done this year. I feel like my biggest trouble is that I tend to like travel a lot in the holidays, obviously, like many of us, and these are not very travel friendly. Like this is why my suitcase winds up being overweight anytime that I go anywhere, is because I try to stuff books this massive into it. So maybe I'll set a goal for myself to finish this one before I go home for Thanksgiving, so that I can just bring this one and I can do this over Thanksgiving. Okay, those are all of the books that I had to share with you guys today. If you have any more recommendations, I'm always down to hear them. Are there any books that you are determined to finish before the end of the year? Let me know in the comments below, and I love to talk books with you. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you soon. Bye!